Hey guys, welcome to Neighbor Stories with JusRead. Today we're diving into some incredible stories about overcoming the toughest neighbor disputes. Our story is titled, Stopping an Homeowner Association from Banning Kids' Playgrounds by Building 20 New Ones. The story starts like this. I never thought I'd become the neighborhood rebel, but life has a funny way of pushing you into unexpected roles. My name's Mike, and up until last year, I was just your average suburban dad trying to keep up with my mortgage payments and my kids' endless energy. But when our homeowners association decided to wage war on children's laughter, well, let's just say they picked the wrong playground to mess with. It all started on a crisp autumn morning. I was sipping my coffee on the front porch, watching my two kids, Emma, 8, and Liam, 6, race each other to the community playground at the end of our street. That rickety old jungle gym had been the heart of our neighborhood for as long as anyone could remember. Sure, it was showing its age, a little rust here, a wobbly swing there, but the sound of children's laughter echoing from that spot was as much a part of our community as the trees lining our streets. As I watched Emma push Liam on the swing, I noticed a group of people huddled near the playground entrance. They were gesturing wildly and shaking their heads, their voices carrying on the wind. Curiosity got the better of me, and I wandered over to see what all the fuss was about. Can you believe this? My neighbor, Sarah, thrust a piece of paper into my hands as soon as I approached. They can't do this, can they? I scanned the official-looking document, my heart sinking with each word. It was a notice from the Maple Grove Homeowners Association, announcing their decision to remove all playground equipment from community areas, effective immediately. The reason? Safety concerns and noise pollution. This has got to be a joke, I muttered, looking up at the small crowd that had gathered. Most were parents like me, their faces a mix of disbelief and anger. A few older residents stood off to the side, nodding in agreement with the notice. It's about time, I overheard Mrs. Wilkins, our resident grump, say to her equally curmudgeonly husband. Those screaming brats have been ruining our property values for years. I felt my blood begin to boil. This wasn't just about a playground, it was about the very essence of our community. I looked over at Emma and Liam, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around their beloved playspace. In that moment, I knew I couldn't let this happen without a fight. We need to do something about this, I said, turning to Sarah and the other concerned parents. There's got to be a way to appeal this decision. Little did I know, those words would set me on a path that would challenge not just our homeowner association, but the very notion of what it means to be a community. The battle for the playgrounds of Maple Grove had begun, and I was about to learn that sometimes, the best way to fight the system is to build something better. Over the next few days, our neighborhood was in an uproar. Parents were organizing emergency meetings in living rooms and backyards, frantically Googling homeowner association bylaws and local regulations. I found myself at the center of it all, my dining room table buried under a mountain of paperwork as we tried to find a legal loophole to stop the playground removal. Mike, honey, my wife, Lisa, said one evening as she watched me pore over yet another stack of documents. I support what you're doing, but are you sure this is a battle we can win? I looked up at her, seeing the concern in her eyes. She was right to be worried. We'd been to 2 homeowner association meetings already, presenting our case with passion and facts, but each time we were met with the same cold response from the board. I'm sorry, but our decision is final, Harold Prescott, the homeowner association president, had said with a smug smile at the last meeting. The liability issues are simply too great. We can't risk a lawsuit if a child gets injured. It was all a smokescreen, of course. We all knew the real reason. A vocal minority of childless residents and retirees who saw kids as a nuisance rather than the future of our community. They'd been complaining about the noise for years, and now they'd finally found a way to get rid of the playgrounds for good. I don't know if we can win, I admitted to Lisa, but I know we can't just give up without trying everything we can. The next morning, I was back at it, this time meeting with a small group of the most dedicated parents in our garage. We'd been brainstorming ideas, but nothing seemed to stick. What if we start a petition? Suggested Tom, a father of 3 from down the street. Sarah shook her head. We already tried that. They ignored it completely. We could threaten to sue, offered another parent. I sighed. With what money? Most of us are already stretched thin as it is. As we debated back and forth, my eyes wandered to the corner of the garage where my old tools sat gathering dust. An idea began to form in my mind. Crazy and ambitious, but just maybe crazy enough to work. What if, I said slowly, instead of fighting to keep the old playgrounds, we built new ones? The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at me. What do you mean? Sarah asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. I stood up, my excitement growing as the plan took shape in my mind. The homeowner association's main argument is about safety and liability, right? So what if we built state-of-the-art playgrounds that are safer and more modern than anything they could object to? But where would we put them? Tom asked. The homeowner association controls all the common areas. A grin spread across my face. In our yards? Every single one of us who's willing. We'll turn our entire neighborhood into one giant playground. The room erupted into a mix of excited chatter and skeptical questions. It was a bold plan, maybe even a little crazy. But as we hashed out the details over the next hour, I could see the spark of hope reigniting in everyone's eyes. By the time our impromptu meeting ended, we had the beginnings of a plan. We'd start small, with just a few playground structures in the yards of the most enthusiastic supporters. If we could prove that these new playgrounds were safe, popular, and didn't cause any of the issues the homeowner association was worried about, maybe we could change some minds. As everyone filed out of the garage, Sarah hung back. "Mike," she said, her voice low, "are you sure about this? It's going to be a lot of work, and the homeowner association is probably going to fight us every step of the way." I nodded, feeling more determined than ever. "I'm sure. Our kids deserve a place to play and be kids. If the homeowner association won't provide it, then we will." Little did I know just how much of a fight we were in for. The next few months would test our resolve, our creativity, and our sense of community in ways I never could have imagined. But as I looked out at my yard, already picturing the laughter and joy it could soon be filled with, I knew we were doing the right thing. The battle for the playgrounds of Maple Grove was about to enter a whole new phase, and I was ready to build a revolution, one swing set at a time. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We started with my yard and those of 4 other families who were all in on the plan. Every evening after work and all weekend long, our little group of playground rebels could be found measuring, digging, and constructing. I'll admit, I was a bit out of my depth at first. My DIY experience was limited to assembling IKEA furniture and the occasional leaky faucet repair. But Tom, it turned out, had worked construction in college, and Sarah's wife was an engineer. Between the lot of us, we managed to muddle through. We decided to start with something simple but eye-catching: a treehouse. Not just any treehouse, mind you, but a multi-level wooden castle nestled in the branches of the massive oak tree in my backyard. It was the kind of thing I'd always dreamed of building for Emma and Liam, but never had the time or know-how to attempt. As we worked, neighbors would stop by, curious about what we were up to. Some offered encouragement, others skepticism, but more than a few asked how they could help. Our little group of 5 families soon grew to 10, then 15. Of course, it wasn't long before the homeowner association caught wind of what we were doing. I'll never forget the day Harold Prescott himself came stomping up my driveway, his face as red as a tomato. "What in God's name do you think you're doing, Mike?" he bellowed, waving a finger at the half-finished treehouse. I climbed down from my perch on a ladder, wiping sweat from my brow. "Building a playground, Harold? What does it look like?" "This is a clear violation of homeowner association regulations," he sputtered. "You can't just build structures like this without approval." I'd been expecting this, of course. We all had. I calmly walked over to a folder sitting on a nearby workbench and pulled out a stack of papers. "Actually, Harold, I think you'll find that we can," I said, handing him the documents. "We've reviewed the homeowner association bylaws thoroughly. There's nothing in there prohibiting playground equipment on private property, as long as it meets safety standards and doesn't exceed height restrictions, which, as you can see from these plans, our structures don't." Harold's face went from red to purple as he flipped through the papers. This is perfectly legal," I finished for him. "And safe? We've had everything inspected and approved by a licensed playground safety consultant." That last bit had been Sarah's idea. We'd pooled our resources to hire a professional to review our plans and make sure everything was up to code. It hadn't been cheap, but it was worth every penny to see the look on Harold's face. "You haven't heard the last of this," he growled, shoving the papers back at me before storming off. As soon as he was out of earshot, the backyard erupted in cheers and laughter. It felt good to score a win, but we all knew this was just the beginning. Over the next month, our little rebellion grew. The treehouse in my yard was joined by a state-of-the-art swing set in Sarah's, an obstacle course in Tom's, and a mini rock climbing wall in another neighbor's. Each new structure was a masterpiece of community effort, with everyone pitching in whatever skills or resources they could. Word spread quickly, and soon kids from all over the neighborhood were flocking to our yards. The laughter and joy that had been missing since the old playground's removal came flooding back, louder and more vibrant than ever. But with the increased activity came increased pushback from the homeowner association. They tried everything to shut us down, issuing fines, which we contested, threatening legal action, which their lawyers advised against, given the shaky ground they were on, and even attempting to pass new bylaws specifically prohibiting backyard playgrounds, which we managed to block by rallying enough homeowners to our cause. It was exhausting, fighting on so many fronts. There were nights when Lisa would find me slumped over the dining room table, surrounded by legal documents and construction plans, wondering if it was all worth it. But then I'd look out the window and see Emma teaching Liam how to climb the rope ladder to the treehouse, or hear the shrieks of laughter from the group of kids racing through Tom's obstacle course, and I knew we couldn't give up. As the number of backyard playgrounds in our neighborhood grew from 5 to 10 to 15, something unexpected started to happen. The very fabric of our community began to change. Neighbors who had barely spoken before were now chatting regularly as their kids played together. Impromptu barbecues and potlucks sprang up around the new play areas. Even some of the older residents who had initially supported the playground ban were starting to come around, charmed by the vitality and warmth that was spreading through the neighborhood. But the homeowner association wasn't done fighting. They had one last card to play, and it was a doozy. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and I was helping a group of kids navigate the newly installed zip line in the Johnsons' backyard, when I saw Harold Prescott approaching, flanked by two men in suits. "Mike," he called out, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "I'd like you to meet Mr. Franklin and Mr. Chen from the Westfield Development Corporation." My stomach dropped. Westfield was a notorious company known for buying up neighborhoods and turning them into soulless, cookie-cutter communities. "Westfield has made an offer to purchase the entire Maple Grove subdivision," Harold announced loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. "They're planning to demolish everything and build a new, family-friendly community. Of course, all current residents will be generously compensated for their homes." The playground fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about our backyard playgrounds anymore. Our entire community was at stake. I looked around at the faces of my neighbors, seeing the same mix of shock and determination that I felt. We'd come too far to give up now. It was time to take our little rebellion to the next level. As Harold and the Westfield representatives waited for their bombshell to sink in, I caught Sarah's eye across the yard. She gave me a subtle nod, and I knew we were thinking the same thing. We had prepared for something like this, even if we hoped it would never come to pass. I turned back to Harold, doing my best to keep my voice steady. "That's quite an announcement, Harold, but I think you might be jumping the gun a bit. The homeowner association doesn't have the authority to sell the entire neighborhood without a vote from all homeowners." Harold's smug smile faltered slightly. "Well, of course there would be a vote, but given the recent unpleasantness with these unauthorized structures," he gestured dismissively at the playground around us, "I think most residents will see the wisdom in accepting this generous offer." One of the men in suits, Mr. Franklin I assumed, stepped forward. "We assure you, our offer is more than fair, and our new development will include state-of-the-art playgrounds and community areas that will make all of this unnecessary." He looked around with barely concealed disdain. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, but I think you'll find that the residents of Maple Grove are quite happy with our community as it is. Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe I promised these kids a turn on the zip line." As I turned my back on them and began helping a young girl into the zip line harness, I could hear Harold sputtering behind me, but I didn't care. We had work to do. Over the next week, our neighborhood turned into a hive of activity. We held emergency meetings in backyards and living rooms, mapping out a strategy to combat this new threat. It wasn't just about saving our playgrounds anymore, it was about preserving the very soul of our community. We divided into teams, each tackling a different aspect of the fight. Sarah led a group researching the legal implications of the proposed sale, looking for any loopholes or regulations we could use to our advantage. Tom and his team focused on rallying support from every homeowner in Maple Grove, going door to door to explain the situation and gather signatures for our cause. My job was perhaps the most challenging and the most fun. I was tasked with showcasing just how special our community had become, to prove to everyone that what we had built was worth fighting for. We decided to host a neighborhood-wide playground palooza, a massive event that would span all 20 of our backyard playgrounds. It would be a celebration of everything we had accomplished, and a demonstration of the incredible community spirit that had blossomed alongside our DIY play structures. Planning the event was a logistical nightmare, but everyone pitched in. We created maps showing the location of each playground and planned activities for each one. The Johnson zip line became part of a timed obstacle course. The rock climbing wall in the Chen's yard was the site of a friendly competition. My treehouse was transformed into a storytelling nook, with local authors volunteering to read to groups of kids throughout the day. We also made sure to highlight how our playgrounds had brought the community together in unexpected ways. Mr. Rodriguez, a retired engineer who had initially been skeptical of our project, now spent his afternoons teaching kids the basics of physics using the swing sets and seesaws. Mrs. Patel had started a community garden next to her backyard playground, where kids could learn about growing their own food. The day of the playground palooza dawned bright and clear. As I stood on my front porch watching families begin to stream into the neighborhood, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. This was our chance to show everyone, including the Westfield developers and the homeowner association, what Maple Grove was really about. As the playground palooza kicked into full swing, the energy in the neighborhood was electric. Kids raced from yard to yard, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Parents chatted and mingled, many meeting neighbors they'd never spoken to before. Even some of the older residents who had initially opposed our playground rebellion were getting into the spirit, helping to run game booths or simply sitting back and enjoying the vibrant atmosphere. I made my way through the crowd, checking in on each playground and chatting with as many people as I could. The sense of community was palpable, and I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride at what we had accomplished. As I approached the Chen's rock climbing wall, I spotted a familiar face in the crowd. It was Mrs. Wilkins, the same neighbor who had complained about screaming brats when this all began. To my surprise, she was cheering on her grandson as he attempted to scale the wall. "Mrs. Wilkins," I said, walking up to her, "I'm glad to see you're enjoying the festivities." She turned to me, a hint of embarrassment on her face. "Oh, Mike. Yes, well, I have to admit, this isn't quite what I expected when you all started building these contraptions." I raised an eyebrow, encouraging her to continue. She sighed. "I thought it would just be noise and chaos, but seeing all these families together, watching the children learn and grow, it's rather wonderful, isn't it?" I couldn't help but smile. "It really is. And you know, we couldn't have done any of this without the whole community coming together." Mrs. Wilkins nodded, then lowered her voice. "I heard about that development company wanting to buy us out. You can count on my vote to stay, dear. This old neighborhood's got some life in it yet." As I thanked her and moved on, I felt a renewed sense of hope. If we could win over Mrs. Wilkins, maybe we really could save Maple Grove. The day continued, full of joyous moments and small victories. I watched as Emma helped a younger child conquer their fear of heights on the treehouse rope bridge. Liam had made a new best friend while navigating Tom's obstacle course. Everywhere I looked, I saw the tangible results of our community's hard work and dedication. As the sun began to set, we gathered everyone in the Central Park for the grand finale. We had set up a small stage, and as I climbed up to address the crowd, I felt a moment of nervousness. But looking out at the sea of familiar faces, many of whom I'd gotten to know over the past few months, I found my courage. "Friends and neighbors," I began, my voice carrying over the quieting crowd, "thank you all for coming out today and making this playground palooza such a success. When we started this journey, building playgrounds in our backyards, we had no idea where it would lead us. We just knew that our children deserved a place to play, to grow, to be kids." I paused, looking out at the mix of adults and children, all listening intently. "But what we've created here is so much more than just playgrounds. We've built a community, a place where neighbors look out for each other, where children can roam safely from yard to yard, where the sound of laughter is more valuable than property values." I could see nods of agreement rippling through the crowd. Now, we face a choice. There are those who would have us sell our homes, who think they can replace what we've built with something shinier and newer. But I ask you, can you put a price on this? I gestured to the crowd, to the families standing together, to the children with grass-stained knees and wide smiles. We've shown that when we work together, we can create something beautiful, something worth fighting for. So I'm asking you now, will you fight with me? Will you stand up for Maple Grove? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Cheers erupted from the crowd, people clapping and shouting their agreement. I saw Sarah and Tom in the front row, grinning from ear to ear. Even Harold Prescott, standing at the back of the crowd with a sour expression, couldn't dampen the mood. As I stepped down from the stage, I was swarmed by neighbors offering their support and thanks. The momentum was on our side now, and I knew we had a real chance of saving our community. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. We held official votes, gathered signatures, and presented our case to the City Council. The Westfield Development Corporation tried to sweeten their offer, but we stood firm. This wasn't about money, it was about preserving something priceless. In the end, it wasn't even close. The vast majority of Maple Grove residents voted to reject the buyout offer. Harold Prescott and a few other hardliners on the Homeowner Association board resigned in protest, replaced by a new group of leaders who shared our vision for the community. As for our backyard playgrounds, they stayed, of course, but we didn't stop there. With the new, more cooperative Homeowner Association, we were able to revitalize the old community playground as well, creating a central hub that complemented our network of backyard play spaces. More importantly, the spirit of community that had blossomed during our playground rebellion continued to grow. We started annual events like the Playground Palooza that brought everyone together. Neighbors looked out for each other's kids, lending a helping hand or a watchful eye. The sound of children's laughter, once seen as a nuisance by some, became the heartbeat of our neighborhood. One warm evening about a year after it all began, I sat on my porch swing with Lisa, watching Emma and Liam play with a group of neighborhood kids in our yard. The treehouse castle, now weathered and loved, stood proud against the setting sun. "You know," Lisa said, leaning her head on my shoulder, "when you first told me about your crazy plan to build playgrounds in everyone's yards, I thought you'd lost your mind." I chuckled, remembering those early days of doubt and determination. Honestly, there were times I thought I had too. She squeezed my hand. "But look at what you've done. You didn't just save a playground, Mike, you saved our home." As I looked out at our thriving, joyful community, I felt a deep sense of contentment. We had faced down corporate greed, outdated regulations, and even our own neighbors' skepticism. And in the process, we'd built something truly special. The battle for the playgrounds of Maple Grove was over, and love, laughter, and the indomitable spirit of community had won. And guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. If you enjoyed this epic neighbor showdown, please smash that like button. comment with some house emojis to show your support, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks a lot, and I will see you again tomorrow with another amazing story.